All right, good. Happy New Year, I guess, right? Yeah, Happy New Year. Chase Oaks, good to see everybody. And that's true at the Legacy campus as well, our Sloan Creek campus. So glad that you're with us if you're out there. Our online campus, those who are watching online, podcasting, as well as our 544 campus. And we need to celebrate this. Today is the 1-year anniversary of the 544 campus out at Wiley. So going really well out there. And they have cookies and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to, don't leave here early. That'd be rude. But if you want to head out to Wiley and check it out at the B&B Theater, they'll have cookies there. So you can do that whatever campus you're at if you're not at 544. So before I jump into this new series and today's talk, which I'm excited about, I do want to say thank you as a church. And I hope you know that as your pastor, I love you as Chase Oakers. I think Chase Oakers are the coolest people in the world. I really do. But I also want you to understand that I admire you, and sometimes, often, in fact, even astounded by you. And for example, as we went through this last holiday season, there are a lot of opportunities to give and to sacrifice time and energy and finances and all kinds of things to lift up other people through that holiday season. A lot of life groups with their own partnerships doing stuff, or all church things, like the Toy Zone at the Family Center in East Plano, and single moms, all this stuff. And you didn't do it just a little bit. I mean, people just poured themselves into this and lifted so many people up, blessed so many families in our community. And then just in general, generosity and giving, even here at this church, as people gave, we were able to finish out the calendar year really strong financially as a church, which is a big blessing going into a whole new year with a lot of vision. And then our Christmas services. Every service for us is an opportunity for us to invite our friends who may or may not be churched or know Christ, or maybe they do know Christ but have had a bad church experience and sometime in the past. And it's like, yeah, I don't, and it's just an opportunity to say, hey, come check it out. Just come and see. And most of us are here because somebody was kind enough to take that risk and invite us. And we have that opportunity to do the same for others. And every week around here is designed for that. But there are a couple times a year, Christmas one of them, where it's especially easy to do that. And so we mentioned that. And so you guys responded, let's put it that way. So we, every year around here for a while, our Christmas services are bigger than the one before. But this last year, because of you, there were 1,000 more guests here than last year. 1,000 more this year than last year because of your invitation, Billy. So it's really cool. And that's just a chance for incredible life change, And many of you, I'm sure, are here because you were invited then. And we're so glad you're on the journey with us. Whether you are checking out Jesus and Christianity, seeing if there's something to that, or you've been a Christian, wherever you're at, we're just glad that you're on board. And where the journey is taking us in the sermon series sense right now is today we launch a new series called Simplify. And what Simplify is really about focus. It's about slowing down enough to evaluate our lives and to say, I want to make sure I'm not just busy. I want to make sure that my life is built around what's most important. And it's an opportunity to declutter a little bit in order to build my life around what is most important. Now, to give us an image, because you think, well, that should be easy to do, right? Declutter, build my life around what's most important. That should be easy. But it's not easy because of the way we live life in our culture. So to give an image of how we tend to live life running so fast, it's really hard to do that. I'm going to share a simple story out of my life that comes in this. There's a file in my head that's a big, thick file. It has a long title, and it's stupid things I've done I would never want to share in a sermon because then everyone would know how stupid I indeed am, okay? And I never want to share that, but it seems like that's what I always share because maybe that's the only option. It's the only thing in there. I don't know. And so here's one of those, all right? So this is 3 years ago. My youngest son, Caleb, was 16 at the time. We were playing golf at this golf course in Alabama, a mountainous area. And so it was a mountain course of big elevation changes. And we've just teed off on this hole, which as you can see from the tee box is a big elevation change. Like it goes way, fairways way down there, 100, however many yards in elevation down. And so we teed off. And at this particular golf course, they have gas golf carts and that have no governors on them to slow you down. So you can go as fast as you want to go, basically, as it can go. And so there's a bunch of signs and warnings leaving this elevated mountain down to the valley about not letting yourself go too fast. And on the left, the cart path is real winding and, down this real steep hill. So I get this bright idea that instead of just going down the windy cart path, let's just go, we went around the tee boxes, but basically go over the hill and just go straight down the hill. Because it's this grass hill, 70 degrees for a couple hundred yards. Why not? Made sense at the time. So without warning my son Caleb, we go, it's like, Caleb, here we go. And we went down. And immediately I realized, big oops, right? So we're totally out of control. And there's no way, if I tried to put on the brakes, we'd mess up for sure. We would crash. So we're going down this hill. We start, 20, 30, 40, 50 miles an hour in this little golf cart in the air more than we're on the ground because it's uneven. So you're just bouncing and landing and, going boom, boom, boom. Things are falling out. And I was as scared as I've ever been in my life. And how we didn't crash, just the grace of God. So if you know my son Caleb, if you don't know him, he's an adventure kind of guy. That kid has never known fear in his life. He's an extreme athlete kind of guy. That's what he does. It's what he enjoys. And so we get to the end of this where we finally slow down, and Caleb looks at me and he's like, Dad, what were you thinking? Which is a real turn of conversation. And I was like, yeah, I really wasn't thinking. And so we go back and get all our stuff, and now, before you file this in your file in your head of, one more reason I knew my pastor was an idiot, let me just say that I think all of us have more in common with that story than we might think. Because living in the culture that we do, it's really a picture of how we tend to live. Because, there's all this gravity pulling at our time and attention. And it's easy just to point our life down the hill and be pulled by that gravity and get out of control. You think about all the things that pull for our time and attention that create that gravity. There's our careers, of course, and our jobs, which always are going to pull for more and more and more of us. But then we've got to take care of ourselves and just our life outside that. And then our relationships are demanding. And then let's say you start dating somebody, and then that's another big gravity thing, another thing added in your life, or you get married, another big thing. And then you have kids, and you think when kids are little tiny and they're in diapers, it's so busy. And you think, I can't wait till they get out of diapers because then it won't be so busy. And then they get out of diapers, and you're like, I wish they were back in diapers. And, and they're running around everywhere, and you're driving them all over the place and doing all this stuff, right? And then you go and become a Christian. And now you're going to church, and you're in a small group, and you're serving the poor, and you're serving the church, and you're just adding all this stuff, and you're like, and you're just going down the hill, hoping you're not going to crash. And what we want to do in this series is to say, hey, let's just stop the cart a little bit. Let's slow down, evaluate, and say, okay, we're going to be busy in this culture, but let's make sure that we're not running so fast that we can't discern what's most important. Not just what's good and, what can fill up my time, but let's make sure that we're not sacrificing what's most important as we're just rushing, and missing things. So, and we're going to do that by looking at Jesus today, and he's going to share with us, as he shared with a friend 2,000 years ago, the principle of simplify. Because Jesus is a great model, of course, of this. Simplify is not about not being busy. It's not about becoming a slacker. It's not about saying, well, we're just not going to do much. That's not what simplify is. Jesus was busy. It's not about not accomplishing a lot, because Jesus was accomplished more than anybody in history. But we're going to live busy lives, and we want to accomplish a lot. But it's making sure that, like Jesus, we actually have a sense of what's most important, and that we live with enough margin and enough peace that we can actually impact people. And just like he had, he was busy, but never out of control, and we don't want to be either. So today we're going to see, as he passes on to a friend 2,000 years ago. It's recorded in the Bible. We get to take advantage of that. That's why he put it in the Bible, so we would know this principle of simplify. Now, to get us into the passage, it's in Luke chapter 10. If you're a Bible turner, if you have a Bible with you or a Bible app, you can turn to Luke chapter 10. The story will start in verse 38. It'll be on the screens behind me as well. So in Luke 10, what's happening is Jesus and his disciples are going to Jerusalem and for another big festival at one of Israel's feast days that good religious people went to. And Jesus and his disciples are going to Jerusalem. And from what we can tell in the books in the Bible that talk about Jesus' life, that every time he went to Jerusalem, he repeated the same pattern. And that is, before he went into Jerusalem, he actually took a little breather. He took a little bit of time in this little village named Bethany. And the reason he did that is because of 3 friends there that he were just replenishing friends in his life that he loved to hang out with. And he took time just to hang out with his friends. And those friends were named Lazarus and Mary and Martha. They were brother and sister to each other. Jesus wasn't, but they were to each other. So Lazarus and Sister Mary, Sister Martha, brother Lazarus. And so this is one of those times where Jesus, on his way into Jerusalem, is going to hang out in Bethany. And this little story is a simple little story. And you read it when you're reading through the Bible and think, oh, it's a cute little story. But it's way more than that, as we're going to see. Now, it's going to be an interaction between Jesus and Mary and Martha. We don't know where Lazarus is. Maybe he's out playing golf or something godly like that. Maybe he's working, which sometimes, work has a way of taking you off the golf course sometimes. But we don't know. But Jesus and Mary and Martha are there in the house, and that gets us to verse 38. As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught. But Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. So he gives a scene, right? Jesus VIP, right? Yeah? Oh, come on. Yeah, when you say, okay, I think so. So he's the Messiah, the one prophesied for centuries. They're understanding that. They're learning that. They're learning that he's more than just a prophet or a man who's important, that he's actually God in human flesh who came here on this planet. And that's a big deal. So Jesus, God in human flesh, is right there in their house. And you've got Mary who's sitting at his feet, and learning. And you've got Martha, who is preparing the meal, because it's a VIP, right? And she wants to make it right. And I think of her name wasn't Martha Stewart, but she could be Martha Stewart, right? Which I'm impressed by Martha Stewart. She's amazing. And so she's doing the Martha Stewart thing. She's making this incredible meal and, just really working hard and in the kitchen. And Mary is there in the living room with Jesus, not helping her. And that ticks her off. And it probably would a lot of you, right? You'd be like, come on, I want to be in there too, right? Somebody's got to cook. And so she's getting more, you can just picture the scene. She's getting more and more upset, sending out subtle cues at first, banging pots a little bit too loud in the kitchen or, muttering under her breath. It gets louder and louder and louder about Mary just sitting there while she's doing all the work. And I'm the one that does all the work out here. Why come nobody ever, that you get the scene, right? Well, all those subtle things aren't working. So she gets unsubtle and she goes out and talks to Jesus. She's going to tell on Mary. Verse 40. She came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me. Now, we know from the original language of the Bible, Greek, that this was not, the way it's constructed, it's real obvious that it's not a real question, it's a rhetorical question. It's a statement. It's kind of like when Christy asks me a question like this when we're at home together. Jeff, don't you want to come and help me fold the laundry? Okay? That's not a real question, right? That's a rhetorical question. She's not looking for the answer. Like if she says, Jeff, don't you want to come and help me fold the laundry? She's not looking for me to say, no, I want to sit on the couch and keep watching football, but thank you for the opportunity. Right? That I've learned over the years a few things, and that's one of them, and that is when that kind of question, it's, come over here and help me fold the laundry, right? This is one of those kind of questions. She's saying, Jesus, obvious, right? That, I'm in here doing all the work. She's just sitting there. Tell her to, get her hiney in here and help me out. And she's expecting Jesus to respond and kind of say, thank you, Martha. I was wondering how to do that without hurting Mary's feelings. And, Mary, you're right. You need to get in there and help. That's not fair. But that's not what happens. Next verse, verse 41. But the Lord said to her, to Martha, my dear Martha, you're worried and upset over all these details. But there's only one thing worth being concerned about. And Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. That is not what Martha was expecting to hear. First of all, this gets smoothed out in this translation, my dear Martha, but literally in the Greek, what he says, he just repeats her name twice, Martha, Martha. So it's like, Martha, Martha. Has anybody ever done that to you? You know, I mean, if you think about it, right? Especially if it's somebody like a kid or something. Oh, mom. You know, you'd be like, you know, it's hard to hear that. Jeff. Because a way of saying, you're not getting it. Calm down. You know, let's think about this. And then the gentle rebuke. You're worried and upset over all these details, but there's only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it and will not be taken away from her. What has she discovered? The one thing. That in that moment, cooking the meal was a good thing, but it wasn't the one thing that was most important. And Mary had discovered in that situation, in that circumstance, in that moment, the one thing that was most important, and she seized it, and Jesus says, I'm not going to take that away from her because she got it. She got the one thing. And that's the principle of simplify. Now, to help us with the principle of the one thing, we're going to look at more deeply. Peter, I need my prop up here. Thank you very much. So here's my prop for the one thing, okay? Now, coincidentally, it does say Alabama Crimson Tide, and it's some people would say this about being number one, and Alabama being number one, and all that. But it's just coincidental, okay? This is about the one thing. And I will say, as an Alabama fan, I think I've been pretty tame this season on the whole Alabama going to the national championship tomorrow night. And haven't I? I think I have. And so I'm not going to talk about that because we're here to talk about Jesus and God, Bible. But I'm going to put it here just to remind us, to give us a picture of the one thing, okay? One thing. Now, Christy was like, Jeff, don't do that. Don't do that. It's so obnoxious. But I know it's not about Alabama. It's about the one thing, okay? So the one thing. Mary and Martha, let's illustrate the one thing through that story, right? Because that's where the principle comes out of. What Martha was doing was really good. Somebody had to cook and, meal and all that. But Mary discovered the one thing. Somehow she knew in that moment that this was really special. I mean, yes, the Messiah was in her house. But she's learning that this Messiah is actually more than that this is God in human flesh. Her Creator is in her house in human form. And I'm going to leave him in the living room and say, see you later, I'm going to go make some food? No. I can order pizza, but, I'm going to learn everything I can. I'm not going to miss this opportunity that's right there in front. When is that ever going to happen again? And therefore, she seizes the one thing. Martha was doing a good thing, but, you think about it, Jesus, I know somebody had to cook the food, and you think, somebody's got to do it. Some of you, I know, are thinking like that. But Jesus was pretty good at taking care of food problems. Like feeding the 5,000 when they're, or wine. He ran out of wine, and he's great to have at a party. He turns water into wine, and it's the best wine anybody's ever had. It's like, cool, glad we invited him. Right? Jesus knows how to do that kind of, at this moment, Mary sensed this is the opportunity that I'm going to seize. That's the principle of simplify. It's the discipline of finding the one thing or the few things or the one thing that is most important to make sure that we build our lives around that. The way the Apostle Paul, which we'll look at next week, the way the Apostle Paul talks about it is really cool. Paul, who was key leader in the New Testament era, church leader who really took this and ran with it, the way he said it was redeeming the time. In Ephesians 4, he talks about redeem the time because the days are evil, meaning we don't know how long between now and when Jesus comes back, so let's redeem the time. Let's seize the moment, right? Let's make every minute count, kind of a thing. Redeem the time. But the way he says it is really cool. Because in the original language of the Bible, again, we just mentioned that, Greek, there are two words that he could have used for time, two major words for time in Greek. One is chronos, like where we get chronology or chronograph, watch. And that's for the linear ticking of time, chronos. It's the tick, 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 tick of time. It just goes. That's not the word he uses, though. The word that he uses is a really cool word in Greek. It's kairos. And kairos is a word that meant really the opportunity embedded in the ticking of time. It's that every moment has an opportunity. And you either grab it or you don't, but every moment has an opportunity to seize. And it was so important in Greek thought and philosophy, even their religion, that they made a god out of Kairos. That was one of the gods in their mythology. And Kairos was always pictured as a guy with wings, out his, big wings, even wings on the back of his feet, because he was really fast. And he was bald. He had no hair anywhere, back or front, except for a lock of hair that either came out of his forehead or face. It was kind of weird, hard to eat spaghetti. But it would, be, I don't know why I think about it. But anyway, it was out like that. And the picture was that he's fast, so he comes, just sits there for a little while, and then flies away. And if you don't seize it on the way, grab that lock of hair, you'll miss him, because the minute he starts flying away, there's nothing to grab hold of. That was the picture of Kairos. And that's what Paul uses to say, look, make sure that in time you seize the moments that are embedded you seize the opportunities that are embedded in a moment, in a season, in an area of life, because those opportunities come and go, and if you miss them forever. So seize them, don't miss them. Now that's something I'm thinking about a lot these days, myself, because of a unique season that my family is in. And many of you know that, if you've been around Chase Oaks for a while, that my dad, whom I love a lot, I know a lot of great dads. I've never met anybody like mine. He's an amazing dad, and I love him. Last year, in January, was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and that's a tough journey to be in for him and our family. And you never want anybody to have something like that, right? To have to suffer through a terminal disease. But there is and by the way, you guys have been great, and some of you have even found out like how to get to them, like sending them cards and stuff. And I mean, just how cool is that? I appreciate that. I don't know how you've done it, but thank you for doing it. But when you have a terminal disease like that, or somebody you love, that's not good. But there is a silver lining. And the silver lining is that you're heightened to the reality that I don't have forever with this person that I love. There's a terminus. There's an ending point. And it's going to come quicker than I want it to. And so it makes you more intentional. You realize this is an opportunity that I don't want to lose. I want to seize. And so therefore, every moment with my dad is a really meaningful moment to me, right? Because you realize, how many moments are we going to have? We don't know. Now, the truth is, that's true always, right? With anybody, because every one of us are terminal. The death rate for human beings is still about 100%, right? And so we never know. In our case, this year, we realized, you know what? It's obvious, and therefore there's a lot of opportunities I could say yes to that I'm saying no to. Because they're going to be there, but this opportunity isn't in this season of life. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to be, so I'm going to seize it, or try to. Or let me use another illustration. When a couple weeks ago, I was looking at an old computer, and I have these, all these files and stuff on an old computer that haven't been brought over to the new one. And this goes a long way back, like 15, 20 years, and I'm not going to bring those things in or not. And so I was looking at a sermon from 15 years ago. And it was really interesting because it was a different phase of life for me. My boys were little, 4 and 7. And there was a little story in that sermon that happened that week that I wrote that sermon 15 years ago when Caleb was 4. And I'm reading him at night. I'm reading him a little story, putting him to bed. Now, a lot of you are in this, you got little bitty kid stage. And when you're in that stage, I mean, life's busy, you're pulled lots of directions, and bedtime is like, man, let's just get him into bed so we can, right? And you want to get him in bed. And I was in that mode. So I was rushing through this story, just trying to get the kid in bed, close the door, good night, So Caleb senses that, right? That I'm rushing through this, that I want to move on. So I'm reading the story pretty fast, probably skipping pages, thinking they won't notice, that kind of thing. And he says, Dad, it's okay. You don't have to keep reading. I don't need a whole story to go to bed. Now, that was nice of him. But even in that moment 15 years ago, as I wrote in that message, it was like, dummy, missing the point, right? And now reading that a couple weeks ago, if I could talk to myself back then, I'd be like, no, you're a big dummy. Like really big deal. You think you're a little dummy. You're a big dummy because you're missing the opportunity. You'll want that. I mean, you just can't imagine how much you'll want to go back and do that again. But in the moment, it's hard to see the opportunity, right? In that season. But that's in the past. How about now? Now my kids, just with that opportunity are in college, 19 and 22. So Caleb's in college. I have more access to him. I don't know where he's going to end up one day. When he graduates and moves on. My son Colin, who's 22, it works here in a company in Frisco. Graduated in May. He's living at our house right now, and that's a unique opportunity. Is that going to last forever? I don't think so. I don't know, but it really is nice. While it's right now it's all good, and man, what an opportunity, right? That I don't want to miss. I don't want to look back and think, oh man, I wish I would have taken advantage. Right? It's that kind of thinking. Or even in this church. I mean, I've been doing ministry long enough to know that what God is doing in our church and through our church in our community and world and what's going on, this is not normal. It's just not. I would love to say, oh yeah, it's just the way it is. It's not. It's not normal. It's a unique thing that God is doing. And as pastor, you think, well, of course you're going to be involved because we pay you to, kind of do that. But I don't want to think that way, right? This is too unique. I want to just jump in with both feet and pour my life into what God's doing around here. I mean, that's right. I mean, I don't want to look back and think, oh man, that was so cool. I wish I'd really. It's those kind of moments and those kind of opportunities that God just puts in front of us, and we can either seize them or let them go. And that's the principle of Simplify. And over these weeks, that's what we'll be doing. We're going to be, next week, we'll be looking at the discipline of living that way, illustrated by Paul, the Apostle Paul, he really lived this way. And just get really practical and say, yeah, what does it mean to live this way? Manage our life well and busy lives, but manage them well. And then after that, we'll be looking at different areas of life and saying, yeah, what is the one thing? If we're going to boil it down to one thing that would be most important in that area of life or this season of life, then let's make sure, we can do a lot of stuff, but let's make sure we don't miss this. But before we jump to other areas of life, I want us today to look back at the story of Mary and Martha, at the opportunity that you and I have that's easy to take advantage of. Maybe you could say the ultimate opportunity, and that is to know Jesus, to sit at the feet of Jesus like Mary had the opportunity to do. I don't think we realize the opportunity we have. At least I tend to miss it. Because, you look back at that story of Mary and Martha and Jesus being there, and you think, man, that'd be really awesome, wouldn't it? Have Jesus, like 2,000 years ago, come to your house and you get to sit there and talk. Wouldn't that be incredible? Imagine, even today, if, there's a knock at the door, you open the door and there's this guy there in a robe and he says, hey, I'm Jesus, I want to hang out with you. What would you do? Well, you call 911 and say, there's a guy who claims to be Jesus who's in a robe, I don't know, and I need you to come get him and, he needs some help. But let's say he convinces you he really is actually Jesus, like he does a mirror, he makes a bird or something, and then he takes your linoleum floor, and all of a sudden he turns it into hand-scraped wood. And you're like, wow, I knew I liked Jesus, but this is awesome, and whatever it is, right? And and then you're like, well, you invite him in. You're like, watch the floors, but come on in. And you sit down and have this conversation. And because I think when I look at that story, I'd be like, you know what? I would not have missed that one. 2,000 years ago, Jesus comes into my house. The Son of God is there in bodily, he's right there. I'm not going to miss that one, I don't think. I'm not going to do the Martha thing. I think I'd get the Mary thing. And, of course, we know a lot more than they knew, and so it's a little unfair to say that. But I think, oh, no, I would not miss that one. But you know what Mary would say to me? She would say, Jeff, you've got such a bigger opportunity than I ever had. And she'd be right. Because Jesus came to bring a whole new way of relating with God. And before the death and resurrection of Jesus, and he ascended to heaven, that Jesus on the earth was at one place at one time. So if you want to hang out with him, he either need to come to your house or you need to go follow him and try to chase after him and all that. Because that's where he's one place at one time. Not so easy to relate to. He was accessible, he was open and all that, but, it was rare. In the Old Testament days before that, even more rare. The only access people had to God was through the high priest who would go into the Holy of Holies, the presence of God, once a year on behalf of the nation. But what Jesus came to do is to say, no, I've come to bring a whole new access and opportunity. And through his death on the cross and resurrection and And when you and I come to know God through faith in Jesus, we enter into a whole new relationship with God where we can come into the Holy of Holies in the presence of God anytime we want. And if you would have said that to Old Testament believers centuries ago, what I just said, they would have probably stoned me for blasphemy. That I would say, oh yeah, you can just go into God's presence anytime you want because you're a child of God. But that's what Jesus came to do. In Revelation 3:20, he's talking to one of the New Testament churches. And he says, here I am, Jesus. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat, fellowship with him and he with me. Meaning he's there. He's waiting. Anytime we want, we can relate to our Creator. Anytime we want, because of the presence of the Holy Spirit in our life, we can relate to God anytime. Which is an amazing opportunity, but obviously easy to take for granted, right? When it's just right there. So in 2016, wouldn't it be cool if all of us would say, you know what, let's just not take that one for granted. I mean, God is so patient with us and all that, but the opportunity is right there, and let's grab it. Let's seize it. And you think, well, okay, what would that mean? Like, how do I deepen a relationship with God? And the good news is it's not rocket science. He tells us how. And he doesn't make it hard. It's like, if you seek me, you'll find me. He's not trying to avoid us. And it's not just for God's favorite people or those who are like really good at being good. And it's come as you are, right? You come and he takes us as is, begins to grow us and change us. But he said, come on, so it's accessible, it's open, it's available. And then what do we do? Once we begin a relationship with God through faith in Jesus, what do we do? Well, the Bible talks about certain activities, certain things that we can do to grow a relationship with God, what some people who write books about things like this call spiritual disciplines. There's activities that we engage, and they don't grow us, but it provides the opportunity, the context for God to meet with us in that activity, and He grows us, and we get to know God better. So what are those? Well, here's a few as we summarize it at Chase Oaks. Come as you are, be transformed, make a difference. What is it? Come as you are, discipline, engagement, where we can grow in our relationship with God. Well, that's what we're doing right now. You've already checked one off the list. You're doing great in 2016. You know it? Already. Because you're here. You've shown up. Because what happens when we gather together as God's people is we encourage each other as we worship God together, which He appreciates and enjoys, and it also lifts our heart and our, above our circumstances to Him. But in the preaching moment, in the teaching moment, we hear from God in a unique way. There's something unique in that preaching moment when God's people are gathered that's just a unique opportunity for God to speak to us through His Word. And we can either miss it or, not, or grab hold of it. Like last week for me. Last week I was out of town, so I wasn't here in town at Chase Oaks. And I was out of town doing some study at a friend's lake house for the spring, for series planning, sermon series planning, all that. And on Sunday morning, I was getting a lot done. And, a number of you are at our online right now, watching online. And we have our online things at 10:45 during this service. And so I know that's there. I know that's there. And I've watched it when I'm not, when I've been traveling. But this time I thought, I think I'm just going to blow this one off because I'm really getting a lot done. And, but there was something where God just wouldn't let me. It's like the Holy Spirit just saying, no, you need to go to church online. I mean, I know it's not the same as being here, but you need to go online. You need to do it. So I did. So I opened up online. So glad I did. I mean, the worship time for sure. But then what Eddie Broussard, who spoke last week, what he shared and what he said, I didn't know I needed to hear, but man, did I need to hear that. I mean, God spoke to me and in my family too. And there were ways we were able to have conversations that we would have never had, and God spoke to me. I mean, I would have missed it. And I'm so glad I didn't. I needed that word from God, And that happens all the time. People will come up after services and say, Jeff, oh man, I was going to blow it off, or my friend's been inviting me forever. I'm like, I don't want to go to church. But I came, and I'm so glad I did. It's like you were talking right to me. I mean, really, I don't know if you're reading my email or what, but it's like you were talking right to me. And I'm like, no, we're not, nobody's talking right to you except God, right? Because that's what God does. He communicates through His Word, and that's just God talking to you. So listen, because that's pretty cool. And so this is one of those disciplines as a priority. You say, okay, yeah, I want to meet God in this discipline. And another one is, be transformed. How does that happen? Well, the way we talk about it happens in small group and one-on-one with God, that we grow closer to God, not just in these big rows, but also in circles with other believers, other Christ followers who are on the journey with us, who can encourage us and hold us accountable and pray for us, and we're in the journey together and minister. God speaks through them and we to them. I mean, it's just all that. And this is a church built around small groups because of that. And if you're not in a small group, it'd be a cool thing to say, well, maybe I should do that. One-on-one time with God too, in the Bible and hearing from Him and praying, and that can be hard to do. You hear people talk about that, and it's easy to, I'm going to read the Bible, and you start reading it, and it's so-and-so begat so-and-so, and you're like, well, I don't even know why I'm here. Like, what am I doing? I'm not getting anything out of it. And so that's why we have an online devotion called verticaldevotion.com. And verticaldevotion.com, it's on our website. There's links to it on our Chase Oaks Church app. You can sign up for it. They'll get a daily email. It'll be it's a passage of Scripture and then a little explanation, an opportunity for you, 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day to be with God. We just want to make that as easy as possible, to tee that up, to make that happen, because lots of things happen when we, spend time with God one-on-one. And then make a difference. As we serve in the church and serve in the community, God will grow us in ways that are unique through that as He empowers us and uses us. So the opportunity's there, right? And why not in 2016 say, I want to seize that opportunity. I'd love to know God better at 2017 this time because of some choices I made in 2016 and meet God because I think a lot of times in our relationship with God, we're waiting for the next big thing. But really, relationships, just like with us as humans, are built by little bitty choices over time, spending time with people we care about over time, and in that context, we grow. So we're going to pray here in a moment, an opportunity for us to say, God, help me seize that opportunity to know you better and just speak to me. And if there's one of these things that I should engage in more deeply or am I missing something, God, just pull me towards yourself. Or some of you may be running from God because of shame and you think you got to clean up your life first and all that, and just say, God, help me get over that, because it's come as you are, because the only way we can come. We can't clean up our life if we wanted to. And you say, yeah, come on, I'll do that. But if you're running from God, wherever you're at with God, an opportunity to say, man, I want to know you. And then an opportunity for us at the beginning of this series too, to just say, okay, through this series, as we talk about different areas of my life, just speak to me about what's most important in different areas and seasons of life. Let's bow our heads together. Prayer is just talking to God in your own words. There's no magic words. You can't get it wrong. He doesn't get mad if you say the wrong thing or something. So He's your Father who loves you, wants to spend time with you. So just talk to God in these moments, and I'll guide us as you and I talk with God together. But maybe just start just saying, wherever you are with God, maybe just say, God, I would love for you to pull me closer. And that's true whether you know God or you don't right now. If you're searching or you're a believer, you've been a believer a long time, just say, God, I want to know you better. And what is it that, as I am entering this new year, what is it you just nudge me toward to take advantage of that opportunity to know you better? And then, as well, just ask God. Just say, look, at the beginning of the series, Simplify. God, I want to come each week ready to hear from you, because I don't want to miss the one thing in these different areas of life. I want to build my life around what's most important. And so, God, just speak to me in this series and pull me towards not just what's good, but what's best. Father, I thank you for how you want to do what we're praying. And I thank you for your patience with us. Because this is a messy process of building a relationship with you and living life intentionally. And you know that. It's so easy for us to get distracted. So, Father, I pray that in this series, you'd help us to just slow down enough to refocus and keep nudging us towards yourself as you do. In Jesus' name, amen.